Good morning, everyone. Okay. Can you hear? Yeah, I think we're okay. All right. I'm Teresa Poole. I'm the worship associate today. We want to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roanoke, Virginia. And we extend a special welcome to you if this is your first time joining us. We also say welcome to those who are joining us on YouTube. And if you have a request for lifelines, please put that in the chat feature in the next few moments. Our minister is the Reverend Walter LaFleur. He is with us today. And also we have the Raymond, Mason, and Wainwright family who will be joining him to present a special service on racial history and equality. It's entitled Wearing the Single Garment of Destiny, Douglas Wheatley King and the Call to Justice. And a reminder for all of us, please silence your cell phones if you have not already done that. Our words of welcome, whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your situation in life, whatever your experience of the holy, as you come seeking love, your presence here is a gift. Whether you are filled with sadness, overflowing with joy, needing to be alone with yourself, or eager to engage with others, all who welcome all are welcome here. And our covenant, we commit to supporting each other with respect and direct communication as we work in community to explore spiritual growth and to be a force for good in the world.
So this is a song by Melanie DeMore, and she is an active, on my tiptoes, she is an active composer and song leader and a community builder around the United States. I wish I could tell you exactly where she's from, but I cannot. But her name is listed in the order of service, and you can look her up and learn a lot about who she is. During the month of February, almost all the music you're hearing is by African American composers. We're doing this back here because it just sounds really good for us.
Blessed be the tree of life that grows within you and me. Blessed be the tree of life. Blessed be the tree of life that grows within you and me. Blessed be the tree of life. Steady and true, rooted in love, shelter and peace in all and above. Blessed be the tree of life that grows within you and me. Blessed be the tree of life. Sing to the sky, rise from the earth, seasons come round again, death to rebirth. Blessed be the tree of life that grows within you and me. Blessed be the tree of life. Blessed be the tree of life that grows within you and me. Blessed be the tree of life.
It was good. Thank you. Good morning. Today's guest speaker will be Rich Raymond. He's the father of Heather Mason, the grandfather of Nate Wainwright, and the father-in-law of Gary Mason. He's a very well-connected fellow. He'll be assisted by readers Nate, Gary, Heather, Rich's wife Judy, and me. He'll give the sermon titled Wearing the Single Garment of Destiny, Douglas, Wheatley, King, and the Call to Justice. Teresa will read passages from Frederick Douglass, Phyllis Wheatley, and Martin Luther King, interweaving the themes of literacy, inclusion, faith, and racial justice. Rich has taught literature and writing at colleges in Wyoming, Georgia, Arkansas, and Mississippi. He began teaching in 1969. While in retirement, he continues to teach online. Over 5 decades, he's used the works of Douglass, Wheatley, and King to teach the sustaining connection between literacy and liberty, between eloquence and social justice. I think you'll be in for a treat this morning. I should do the chalice lighting words, shouldn't I? Our chalice lighting words this morning. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of love.
Good morning. If you are a young person, come on down. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jessie. I am the Director of Lifespan Faith Development here at UUCR. And today I have a really cool book by Monica Clark Robinson, and the illustrations are by Frank Morrison, and they're really awesome. It's called Let the Children March. "1963, Birmingham, Alabama. I couldn't play on the same playground as the white kids. I couldn't go to their schools. I couldn't drink from their water fountains. There were so many things that I couldn't do. One warm spring night, my family went to church. We weren't there to have regular services. We were there to hear Dr. King speak. We were there to plan. He wanted to raise an army of peaceful protesters to fight for freedom. His brown eyes flashing fire and love, Dr. King told us the time had come to march. If I march, Mama said, I'll lose my job, sure enough. I can't march, Daddy said. I got a family to feed. The weight of the world rested on our parents' shoulders, but this burden, this time, did not have to be theirs to beat. I don't have a boss to fear, my brother said, or a job to lose. We can march this time. We'll be Dr. King's army, I said. I'll be fine, Daddy, I promised. Don't worry, Mama. Dr. King didn't like children being put in harm's way. He was a daddy too, after all. But he said that though we were young, we were not too young to want our freedom. Let the children march. They will lead the way. On May 2nd, a sunny Thursday, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, we all met at the church, dressed in our best, feet ready. In a silence so loud that all I could hear was my racing heart, we began to walk. Hand in hand we marched, so frightened yet certain of what was right for our freedom. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm gonna walk on. Would I be hurt? Would we be heard? Would it all be worth it in the end? I wanted to run from the angry faces in the crowd, run from danger, run from fear. Boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, on and on we marched. We marched. We marched. Hate dogged my heels all that day, its yellowed canine teeth sharp, but courage walked by my side and kept me going. Disperse or you'll be jailed, the police shouted the first day. Disperse or you'll get wet, the police shouted the second day. Disperse or we'll release the dogs, the police shouted the third day. We did not disperse. We kept on marching. We wouldn't stop until things started to change. Hundreds of us went to jail on the first day, and even more on the second. My turn wasn't until the third day. After I was sprayed by water stronger than anything I've ever felt, rough hands pushed me forward, and I fell to my knees in the police wagon. I was going to jail. We are going to finish this book upstairs, and this book will be available to the adults who choose to finish it after the service. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we read. Sounds like a good deal? Let's do it.
The first reading is from Frederick Douglass, from his memoir, Narrative of an American Slave. He explains how he learned to read and write in a culture that did not allow Black people to read and write. During this time, my copybook was the board fence, brick wall, and pavement. My pen and ink was a lump of chalk. With these, I learned mainly how to write. I then commenced and continued copying the italics in Webster's spelling book. until I could make them all without looking on the book. By this time, my little Master Thomas had gone to school and learned how to write and had written over a number of copybooks. These had been brought home and shown to some of our neighbors and then laid aside. My mistress used to go to a class meeting at Wilk Street Meeting House every Monday afternoon and leave me to take care of the house. When left thus, I used to spend time in writing in the spaces left in Master Thomas's copybook, copying what he had written. I continued to do this until I could write a hand very similar to that of Master Thomas. Thus, after a long, tedious effort for years, I finally succeeded in learning how to write. Our second reading, this is an early poem that was written by Phyllis Wheatley, who was abducted and sold into slavery. The poem demonstrates how quickly the slave girl learned English, how sincerely she believed Christian training, and at the end, how earnestly she implored white people to regard Black people as fellow humans rather than subhuman savages. On being brought from Africa to America, 'twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew, some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, Black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. Our third reading is from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It's his answer that was written from the Birmingham jail in response to the editorial that was penned by Christian and Jewish clergymen there, in which they publicly ridiculed his urgency in the fight for civil rights. Sometimes a law is just on its face and unjust in its application. For instance, I have been arrested on a charge of parading without a permit. Now, there is nothing wrong in having an ordinance which requires a permit for a parade, but such an ordinance becomes unjust when it is used to maintain segregation and to deny citizens the First Amendment privilege of peaceful assembly and protest. We have waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional, God-given rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward gaining political independence, but we creep at a horse and buggy pace toward gaining a cup of coffee at a lunch counter.
Morning. I want to acknowledge first that we borrowed the topic, or the title for our talk, Wearing the Single Garment of Destiny. That, of course, comes from Martin Luther King as well. But 60 years ago, he issued that call to justice, and he had a great fear of what would happen if we failed to realize that we wear a single garment of destiny. Unitarians, as we know, celebrate one God, and Universalists believe that salvation can begin here and now for everyone. United, UUs have always rejected the concept of state-sanctioned injustice, as well as racist notions of nationalism. Now, UUs may also have an emerging eighth principle that insists that we do something, that we answer the call to justice with action, not just with goodwill. To reinforce such convictions, you use, indeed everyone, should listen regularly to the voices of Americans who have witnessed the reality of injustice. Americans such as Frederick Douglass, Phyllis Wheatley, and Martin Luther King, whose testimonies you heard in Teresa's readings. Both Douglass and Wheatley began lives as slaves, Douglass at birth, Wheatley at the Boston slave market. And King, as you know, died a martyr to the cause of racial justice. All three displayed intelligence, courage, and compassion, qualities defined then by our dominant culture as beyond the reach of Black men and Black women. So what's at stake if we refuse to listen to such voices? Nothing less than the truth of our past and our hope to achieve social justice. Indeed, if we close our ears to these voices, we will repeat our past littered with examples of injustice. We will also ensure a grim future. After all, we've learned from the so-called Indian wars in our own country what happens when powerful governments define indigenous peoples as savages. The manifest destiny of white people then warrants land theft, canceled cultures, and genocide. We've also learned from our own history what happens when the economy of that dominant culture needs free labor. Non-white residents of other countries get defined as permanently other. Commodities, chattel, each man just 3/5 of a man, each woman a sex slave, a cog in the machine of endless slave manufacture. And we've learned from Adolf Hitler what happens when a dominant culture needs an explanation for its decline and its troubled economy. Jews find themselves redefined as a threat to the rightful master race, a problem that can be readily solved by opening the oven doors. Let's listen again to the voice of Frederick Douglass, who displayed these three characteristics: intelligence, courage, and compassion, in his achievements as the greatest orator and abolitionist of the early 19th century, but also as a slave boy. As such, Douglass had no access to formal schooling, as his Baltimore culture closed all school doors to Black children and even made it illegal to teach a Black child to read. A person with no access to language, his dominant culture believed, can never be free. That was their goal. So we see this slave boy's intelligence most vividly in a book called The Narrative of an American Slave, where Douglass tells the story of his acquisition of literacy, not in school, but on the streets and on the loading dock, where he tricked white boys and white laborers into teaching him to read and write. Here's another sample of this intelligence given voice by Nate Wainwright.
The idea as to how I might learn to write was suggested to me by being in Durgin and Bailey's shipyard. After frequently seeing the ship carpenters at their hewing and getting a piece of timber ready for use, write on the timber the name of that part of the ship for which it was intended. When a piece of timber was intended for the larboard side, it would be marked thus L. When a piece was for the starboard side, it would be marked thus S. A piece for the larboard side forward would be marked thus LF. When a piece was for the starboard side forward, it would be marked thus SF. For larboard aft, it would be marked thus LA. For starboard aft, it would be marked thus SA. I soon learned the names of these letters and for what they were intended when placed upon a piece of timber in the shipyard. I immediately commenced copying them, and in a short time was able to make the 4 letters named. After that, when I met with any boy who I knew could write, I would tell him I could write as he. The next word would be, I don't believe you. Let me see you try it. I would then make the letters which I had been so fortunate as to learn and ask him to beat that. In this way, I got a good many lessons in writing, which it is quite possible I should have never gotten in any other way.
But Douglas's narrative also conveys his enormous compassion for the suffering of fellow slaves. Let's listen to Douglas's writing, voicing this compassion through the voice of Gary Mason.
I have had 2 masters. My first master's name was Anthony. I do not remember his first name. He was generally called Captain Anthony, a title which I presume he acquired by sailing a craft on the Chesapeake Bay. He was not considered a rich slaveholder. He owned 2 or 3 farms and about 30 slaves. His farms and slaves were under the care of an overseer. The overseer's name was Plummer. Mr. Plummer was a miserable drunkard, a profane swearer and a savage monster. He always went armed with a cow skin and a heavy cudgel. I have known him to cut and slash the woman's head so horribly that even master would be enraged at his cruelty and would threaten to whip him if he did not mind himself. Master, however, was not a humane slaveholder. It required extraordinary barbarity on the part of an overseer to affect him. He was a cruel man, hardened by a long life of slaveholding, who at times seemed to take great pleasure in whipping a slave. I have often been awakened at the dawn of day by the most heart-rending shrieks of an own aunt of mine. I remember the first time I ever witnessed this horrible exhibition. I was quite a child, but I well remember it. Before he commenced whipping Aunt Hester, he took her into the kitchen, stripped her from neck to waist, leaving her neck, shoulders, and back entirely naked. He then told her to cross her hands, calling her at the same time a damned bitch. After crossing her hands, he tied them with a strong rope and led her to the stool under a large hook in the joist, put in for the purpose. He made her get upon the stool and tied her hands to the hook. She now stood fair for this infernal purpose. Her arms were stretched up at their full length so that she stood upon the ends of her toes. He then said to her, "Now, you damn bitch, I'll learn you how to disobey my orders." And after rolling up her sleeves, he commenced to lay up on the heavy cowskin, and soon the warm red blood, amid heart-rending shrieks from her and horrid oaths from him, came dripping to the floor. I was so terrified and horror-stricken at the sight that I hid myself in a closet and dared not venture out till long after the bloody transaction was over.
Thank you, Gary. You heard in Gary's reading not only Douglas's love for Aunt Hester, but his insistence that we see and hear what the institution of slavery does to the self-dehumanized oppressor, the man with the whip. Roughly 100 years before Douglas was born into slavery, a 7-year-old girl from West Africa came across the ocean on a slave ship, Phyllis, and began her new life as an American slave. The name Wheatley, of course, was the name of her owner, her purchaser. In Teresa's second reading, we heard the voice of a young woman who appreciates her kind owners and their lofty ideals of America and its Christian faith, but also suggests politely that her betters might think better of her people. Listen now to the voice of Heather Mason as she reads another example of Wheatley's poetic brilliance as she eulogizes Reverend Dr. Sewell, a man she deems a prophet as well as her monitor. As you listen, you'll marvel at her mastery of rhyming heroic couplets, every bit as crisp as those of the famous London poet Alexander Pope. But listen too for her compassion for her own people when she uses the pronoun we at the end.
On the death of the Reverend Dr. Sewell, 1769. Ere yet the morn its lovely blushes spread, see Sewell numbered with the happy dead. Hail, holy man, arrive the immortal shore, though we shall hear thy warning voice no more. Come, let us all behold with wishful eyes the saint ascending to his native skies. By duty urged my mournful verse to close, I for his tomb this epitaph compose. Lo, here a man redeemed by Jesus' blood, a sinner once, but now a saint with God. He sought the paths of piety and truth, by these made happy from his early youth. In blooming years that grace divine he felt, which rescues sinners from the chains of guilt. Mourn him, ye indigent, whom he has fed, and henceforth seek, like him, for living bread. Even Christ, the bread descending from above, and ask an interest in his saving love. Mourn him, ye youth, to whom he oft has told God's gracious wonders from the times of old. I too have caused this mighty loss to mourn, for he, my monitor, will not return. Oh, when shall we to his blessed state arrive? When the same graces in our bosoms thrive.
Listen now to Judy Raymond give voice to the words of Margaretta Matilda Odell, Phyllis Wheatley's biographer and a descendant of Wheatley's owner, Susanna Wheatley.
They found Phyllis Wheatley in a situation of extreme misery. Excuse me, this makes me cry. 2 of her children were dead. The third was sick unto death. She was herself suffering for want of attention, for many comforts, and for the greatest of all comforts in sickness, cleanliness. She was reduced to a condition too loathsome to describe. If a charitable individual, moved by the sight of so much distress, sent a load of wood to render her more comfort during this cold season, her husband was much too a gentleman to prepare it for her. It is painful to dwell upon this closing scene in a filthy apartment. In an obscure part of the metropolis lay a dying mother, a wasting child. The mother who stood honored and respected in the presence of the wise and the good of a country which was hers by adoption, or rather compulsion, who had graced the ancient halls of old England and rolled about in the splendid equipages of the proud nobles of Britain, was now numbering the last hours of her life in a state of abject misery, surrounded by all the emblems of squalid poverty. Is it urged that Phyllis is but a solitary instance of African genius? Even though this were the case, which we by no means grant, we reply that Phyllis, fallen into less generous and affectionate hands, she would speedily have perished under the privations and exertions of common servitude. Or had she dragged out a few years of suffering, she would have been much less value to her master than the sturdy negress of more obscure faculties, but whose stronger limbs could have borne heavier burdens. How then can it be known among this unfortunate people how often the light of genius is quenched in suffering and death? The great difference between the colored man and his oppressors seems to us to be that the great ruler of the universe has appointed power unto the white man for a season. And verily they have bowed down their brethren with an iron rod. From the luxuriant savannas of America and the barren sands of Africa, the blood of their victims cries unto God from the ground. Friends of liberty, friends of humanity, when will ye appoint a jubilee for the African and let the oppressed go free? It's me crying. I've tried not to do that.
One of the reasons I love her. 200 years after Odell wrote her memoir on Phyllis Wheatley, 100 years after Frederick Douglass called for the abolition of slavery, and President Lincoln obliged with his Emancipation Proclamation, Martin Luther King scrawled in the margins of a newspaper what has become known as a letter from Birmingham jail, where in 1963, King found himself incarcerated, along with his fellow nonviolent marchers. Their crime? Parading without a permit. You heard some of King's voice in Teresa's third reading. Before we hear a few more of King's famous words, we should remember that he writes in response to fellow clergy from Birmingham, most Christian, some Jewish, who published their letter in the newspaper, asking King, politely of course, to explain why he had made trouble on the streets of Birmingham. Why he was being so pushy, so uppity, so impatient for liberty. In a word, the clergymen want to know why King and his people can't wait for freedom. Of course, we should also recall 5 years later, 1968, King was assassinated in Memphis. He wouldn't quit parading without a permit.
Perhaps it's easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you've seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your Black brothers and sisters, when you see that vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue-twisted young speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public museum park that has just been advertised on television, and to see tears welling up in her eyes when she's told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, Daddy, why do people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you're humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white, colored. When your first name becomes nigger, your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly at tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued by inner fears and outer resentments. When you are forever frightened, fighting, and degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand that our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. I must make 2 honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from the people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exists for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social justice, social progress. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the Negro passively accepts his unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with. Like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tensions exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured.
As King's eloquence rings in our ears, it moves us to anticipate the day that justice finally prevails. We should acknowledge that King would be pleased with recent evidence of Roanoke's progress toward justice. What evidence? Well, if he focused just on my slice of the Roanoke world, he would see me bringing critter treats to Carlos's dog, my response to Carlos, a black man, having first brought treats to my pups. King would see, too, women and men, young and old, working together to build a pocket park in an old Southwest neighborhood, one populated by as many blacks as whites. Would King still be disappointed by the non-involvement of the church in the cause of social justice? Not so much. For he would see that the UU Church of Roanoke provides snacks, meals, books to at-risk children in the surrounding schools and joining other congregations in regular support to Family Promise. Thanks to its racial justice team, UUCR has covenanted with Williams Memorial Baptist Church, and the sister congregations have taken the pledge and committed to doing the work of dismantling racial injustice. Not too far away, the Second Presbyterian Church of Roanoke is making an enormous donation to food pantries, providing coats for the homeless. So our hope for justice here and now rests on no pipe dream of brotherhood. It rests instead on action as well as hope, a powerful blend.
We've gathered to hear good words. We, as a congregation, have gathered to do good deeds. An offering will now be taken in support of the work of this church. As the flute in the part of this congregation, that's who we are and what we do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Wood. I'm here this morning representing the Caring Committee. And as most of you already know, the Caring Committee does a lot to support the life of this congregation. One of those things being that we make the announcement every morning of what our lifelines are. We record and collect and report the joys and concerns that are facing our congregation. So if you have something that you want to share, you can put it in this book, which is in the hallway during the week and on the altar on Sunday mornings, or you can call the church. You can contact a member of the Caring Committee. So into this sacred space, we have one concern and one joy this morning. The concern is that Kate Jones's mother was taken to the hospital this morning, hopefully just precautionary. Keep her and her sister and mother in your thoughts. The joy is that Hildy Getz is home from the hospital. She's recovering nicely from her open heart surgery. She's not ready for visitors, but she would certainly appreciate cards. So there are many unspoken joys and concerns in our hearts in this room this morning, and this is the time when you get to come forward and light a candle below in honor of that. And may the warmth of that candle ease your heart. Please use both sides of the aisle.
I will be your standing stone. I will stand by you. I will be your standing stone. I will stand by you.
We have one more joy/concern in the book this morning. Please forgive me, Bill Bestfitch, for overlooking this. Bill wants us to know, with the help of my sister and her husband, our mom is making some courageous decisions to improve her life. Please keep them, my other 3 sisters and their spouses, and Sherry and me in your hearts and minds. We certainly will, Bill.
I got a phone call this morning from John Binky. He wanted me to let you all know that Mary will be moving to room 307 at Woodland Hill, where she will be joined by John. And their intention is to empty their house of goods and put it on the market. And so you'll get additional notice of when their household goods go on sale. A number of years ago, when I was living in Massachusetts, I was listening to NPR out of New Hampshire, and they were interviewing the first gay Episcopal bishop. And they asked him about prayer. He said, "My definition of prayer is an intimate conversation one has with oneself." I invite you into an intimate conversation with yourself. May we recognize our many blessings.
Well, our announcements the last few weeks have been very, very few, and we are blowing that this morning. We have quite a few. We want to remind everybody about the open house that will be immediately after next Sunday's church service. All the groups, the committees, the different people who are living out the missions of Unitarian Universalism will be at tables, probably have literature to hand out, and some of their members will be there to talk and answer any questions that you might have. And we'll have our usual coffee and tea and hot chocolate, and there will be extra goodies at all the tables. So, and as you can probably smell all the wonderful soups that are in the kitchen today, it's Super Bowl Sunday, and this is a fundraiser for our youth. And they have containers. You can either take it home or you can have some soup here. But they all look good and smell very good. Okay. Also a reminder, Jill talked about the Bradley Free Clinic last week and all the services that they provide. They do medical, dental, eye care, and she told us about the addition of physical and occupational therapy, which is great because that can sometimes be hard for people who do not have insurance to be able to have. Also, they provide prescriptions, and diabetes supplies, nutrition, and some wellness, substance abuse, and women's health care. You can either leave a check here at the church with, in the message line, Bradley Free Clinic, or you can also donate through Vanco, and there's an address here if you'd like that. A reminder, and Rich talked about this, when we help at-risk children with some donations, we need to be able to get some donations here for Pack-A-Snack program. We need small snack size items such as oatmeal packets, fruit cups, granola bars, peanut butter and cheese crackers, cereal cups, mac and cheese cups, spaghetti cups, beanie weenies. You could place all of those donations in the gray bin that's underneath the island in the kitchen. And the Roanoke Sheriff's Office is doing a special program on February 14th. It's to help inform seniors about being savvy and keeping your finances safe from scammers. It's going to be at the Grandin Court Recreation Center. That's on Barnum Road, and we'll be from 10:30 to 11:30. So that's an extra service from our Sheriff's Department. And also, UUCR is going to have a St. Patrick's Day parade. There will be rehearsals for it on Monday, February 13th from 4 to 5:30. Also on Sunday, the 19th, and Tuesday, the 21st. And we have some of these in the lobby for people to look at. And then on March 11th, there will be a parade lineup at 9 a.m. and stepping off at 11 a.m. And some members of UUCR have been, and this is a great follow-up to today's service, about faith-based reparations. It's a community conversation. It's going to be at Roanoke College, sponsored by Roanoke College and the Roanoke Reparations Group. Actually, there were 3 UUCR church members who participated in a interdenominational and diverse book study group last summer. And that group has continued to grow. There's going to be an afternoon session on Friday, March 24th from 7 to 8:30 at Roanoke College. And then there will be a panel discussion. And Reverend Dr. Michael C.R. Neighbors, he is from Evanston, Illinois. He's going to be the speaker. That community has done some reparations work. And our partner church, Williams Memorial Baptist Church, the Reverend Dr. David Jones will be a part of that panel as well. So it's been a very rewarding activity to be involved in. There is also some information, I told y'all it was going to be a lot. There's also some information about earthquake relief for Turkey, which is just overwhelming to even think about it. I cannot imagine what those people are going through. There's additional information available if you'd like it on the COVID-19 plan. A reminder, our wonderful church administrator, to please be sure and sanitize your hands upon entering and exiting the church. And that is finally finished. Wait a minute. The Rev just never gives up.
I wanted to let you know that the Roanoke Times published an editorial I wrote, and I believe it's in Saturday's paper with a focus on reparations. One more.
No, I just want to say thanks to the Raymond, Mason, Wainwright family for a wonderful program.
as we remember the American voices we heard this morning, let's not abide the passiveness. Look, how can we do more? Amen.
So the closing music today is by Mark Miller. And Mr. Miller is a United Methodist musician who went to Yale and Juilliard. He plays the organ and he's a composer and he teaches at Yale now. And his focus is to write music that embodies this quote by Cornel West, which is, "Justice is what love looks like in public." So this is called Draw the Circle Wide. And some of you may know this because we used to sing this in what I call the days of yore, but before the pandemic. Come on up, James. Just infiltrate.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one stands alone, we stand side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one stands alone, we stand side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one stands alone, we'll stand side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide.
We extinguish this flame not like twigs. The warmth of community are the fire commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. That's from Elizabeth Seddon James. Seddon James.